For me, travel is a beautiful chance to appreciate our oneness as children of God, as I mentioned, and it's also a chance to appreciate nature, creation. When I'm on the road and I see somebody crying, when I'm on the road and I see a mother loving her daughter or her son, when I'm on the road and I'm on top of a mountain, and I'm so close to heaven. I mean, Lutherans don't normally do this, but I could imagine doing this on top of the Alps. People ask me, what's your favorite cathedral? And I think it's on top of the Alps, when I'm walking on a ridge. And you're just immersed in the wonder of creation, and it is so vivid. And I'm thankful for that in so many ways. And just in the last few years, I've been developing this idea of the road as church. And I really find that, for me, the road is church. And I'm really thankful I found my niche, and I am absolutely a tour guide. That's what I do. I mean, I just am so passionate about being a tour guide, helping people celebrate this world in all its diversity, and in a way that's kind of a pastor in the rough for this notion that the road is church. And when people are fortunate enough or blessed enough to be able to get out and travel, I think it is an absolute heartbreak if they don't travel in a way that expands their love and their appreciation and is transformational. A lot of people travel in a way that just accentuates everything they have in their outlook. But for me, travel is humbling. Traveling is an adventure. Traveling, I always say, culture shock is a good thing. For me, it's the growing pains of a broader perspective. And that broader perspective can be interpreted or appreciated in a number of ways. But we crave, we strive for, that's our goal, is to come home with the most beautiful souvenir, and that's a broader perspective. And for a person who's interested in getting closer to God, traveling can be a very constructive activity.
Rick Steves, the travel as church. Wonderful. So today we're talking on our third week of our Quest series, and it's on the encounter, the little kitten encountering the worried-looking German Shepherd. The story that Pat chose to read from the Message of Jesus in that lengthy conversation with an unwanted, unnamed Samaritan woman. And it's just as a reminder, lots of times in John, when Jesus' conversations are being recorded, they're more or less call and response. What do I do? This is the answer. You know what I mean? Call and response. But with this particular conversation, we have a theological back and forth. What does this mean? How would this be? And so we're given this wonderful, rich encounter between Jesus and the Samaritan woman on land he shouldn't even have been standing on. So we just want to take a little moment to unpack that. First of all, encounters happen overseas, as he talked about the Alps. Has he never been to our Rockies? Don't you think, hey? So you don't have to go that far away. You can look out just here into the mountains not far from us and have that same feeling of connection with the Holy One. But he's been to the Alps. Who else has been to Switzerland? Great. Okay, so maybe that really resonates with you. Want to just think about, though, how do we encounter when we're on travels? In another time, Rick says, some people will go back to their hotel and watch Netflix. You've got to get out to encounter the new. So let's just take a minute with the gospel. The story is so rich. But as it says in the gospel, Samaritans and Jews did not connect. In fact, the Jewish pattern was to walk all the way around the land of Samaria. So Jesus shouldn't even have been on the land. But he walked across. Then he sent the gang out to 7-Eleven to buy dinner, and he was there with the woman who came to look for water. There's so many layers, aren't there, of what that might mean. What's the well in your life? Where do you go that you might meet somebody? When I was at Queen's, the Reverend Dr. Bob Mumford used to tell us that as pastors, we should lurk with intent. We should linger at coffee shops. For the guys in my class, he said you could go to bars and just see who will sit down and talk to you. That's a well experience, isn't it? Now, she is unwanted by her people. Clearly, we don't know what happened to her many partners. Did they die? Did she get divorced? Did she tire of them? There's no attempt to explain that. But there she is, on at least her 6th relationship. And Jesus says nothing critical, but just to name it, and then engages her with what would be water that would be living water, restorative. That's the huge encounter. But if we encounter a stranger, and we don't necessarily have the insight that Christ has, of course, how do we have those conversations? How do we keep ourselves in the conversation when it's somebody who's new and different? How do we hold our heart open in order to have the connection? So Rick Steves, in his image of travel as church, gives us language that we might just tweak a bit for us here and say, encounter is church. So it could be at the food court at Hillside Mall, or it could be in a marketplace in Old Jerusalem. The attitude that we have can be consistent, can't it? To be open to who's there. Rather than to sit there on our phones scanning through Reddit, we can actually just, if we don't say another word, watch the people. Be curious about who else is at the marketplace when you're there, or at the food court at the same time as you. That is the traveler's mindset, that curiosity without judgment. It's seeing others with the eye of compassion. So it's wonderful that we recognized you, Wally, because that's the way you live life. But no matter how different their culture, they may be buying food that you wouldn't even know what's in it, let alone eat it, but you might when you watch them. So the traveler's mindset, encounter as church, we begin to see how beautiful this possibility is for us. Well, imagine the scandalized disciples when Jesus is discovered to be talking to this woman. There's really hard for us to picture how extraordinarily disturbing that must have been for them. And yet, he didn't stop. He persevered. So she was a woman of no account, no distinction, no importance. In his own culture, Jesus was a man of no distinction. Are we willing to connect with people at that level? Are we willing and able to see the people who come up to our cars when we stop at a red light as a beloved child of God? Even if we don't say anything, are we able to be curious and open and have that encounter as mindset gift of Christ, to see them as precious children of God? Now, on a very literal level, you, through your gifts to buying chocolate bars from Rotary clubs, buying apples from the Lions, donating to mission and service, have helped build lots and lots of wells. That's a really important thing to do. Fresh water is so needed here. And people who come home from traveling, whether it be up north in Canada or around the world, often come back motivated to make life-giving changes, like, for example, raising money, working hard to build wells. The literal truth of that story today is how important water is. And we know so well how few people have clean, reliable water. And so if it was scandalous that Jesus was talking to a Samaritan woman, it also needs to be scandalous that everybody doesn't have fresh water. So that's one level. And then there's the intercultural. Not only is she a woman, but she's Samaritan. You know, it's thrilling for us to come home and say, I've met somebody who did something I have never done or heard of before. To think a new thought, to have a new perspective. This is the traveler's mindset. So they say in January, the 3 most important words are, this is a moment. Okay, I'll give you the first. Happy New Year. Thank you, Larry. Happy New Year in January. Yes. Oh, they go, oh yeah, well, that was a gimme. All right. So in February, the most important words are, thank you, Happy Valentine's, or I love you. And in the spring, the most important 3 words are, Alan?
He is risen.
Christ is risen, Alan. Oh, this is, yeah, one of the boys from home, right? Yes. So I guess those 3 little words change, don't they? Thank you. But let me tell you something that doesn't change. When you're traveling, those 3 little words that really matter are, you are here on the map. Finding yourself on the map when you're lost and you're traveling. You kind of, how many of us have done that? You find anybody to say, where am I on this? And then they turn it over and we start again. So an encounter allows us the possibility of getting a little lost, doesn't it? And yet moving on in trust. We've been places, maybe you have too, where you've been nervous. Is this the right place? Is this the right kind of place to be? And then you turn the corner and there is a cathedral or something that takes your breath away. And you completely forget for that moment that you were ever nervous. Traveler's mindset. So the unexpected, the new, the challenging, these are all the things that we're hoping for our encounter as we travel as a part of our churching, as in how we express our faith. And it doesn't have to be somewhere exotic, which is lucky considering what's going on with BC ferries in the airports, don't you think? It can be right here in the South Island. It can be the Souk potholes. It can be Chinatown. It can be a walk through Ross Bay Cemetery. So, what is the well for us at First Met? Where do we find life-giving water that we won't be thirsty anymore? We are offered the chance to meet people who matter because they matter to God. That's life-giving water. And to allow our definitions to be challenged and changed. You remember the story. It's probably 20 years old, so for those of you who are younger, you may not have heard it. But there was a story of a little boy who packed a lunch, and forgive him, but he took juice boxes and Twinkies. And he put them in his lunchbox. You know this story. And he went off and he said to his mom, I'm going to go find God. And he took off with his Twinkies in his lunchbox. And he walked for a while through the park that was nearby, and then his little legs were getting tired, and he sat down beside a woman on the bench. To the grown-ups in the world, they would have said she looked homeless. But to him, it looked like she had a space on her bench. And so he sat down, and he opened his lunchbox, and he gave her a Twinkie and a juice box of apple juice. And they visited, and she made him laugh, and he made her laugh. Then he packed up his lunchbox, and he went home. Now, when he got home, his mom said to him very sweetly, Welcome home, honey. And did you find God? And he said, Yes, I did. She's got a fabulous laugh. And I did not know that God was a woman. Well, the woman also left the bench, and she met up with her friends. And they said, Well, what have you been doing today? And she said, Well, I spent time with God, and he's a lot younger than I thought he'd be. We never know, do we, who we might meet on that park bench when we sit down with an open heart, ready for the encounter. Amen.